Here we go, Divine Intervention, my favorite album of all time. Am I the only person on earth who can say that? I've heard thousands of albums, and this album has remained my favorite for over 15 years. And I'm going to explain why in long form here, because I've got a lot of love for this album that a lot of people don't seem to agree on or be able to see. First thing I want to do is dismiss the fact that this could just be nostalgia. While I did discover this album early on in my metal career, it wasn't my first Slayer album. It was probably my 5th or 6th Slayer album. And the fact that I don't put any of those above this one is proof that it's not pure nostalgia. I truly love this album for what it is. I'm going to talk about some of the issues that most people have with it, the first being the production. It's a fact this album had production issues. The band went to a few different studios, had different producers. There were issues there. For me, though, I prefer this. This raw sound, Seasons in the Abyss had too much sheen. It was too clean. I like my thrash to sound raw and imperfect. This production style does no disservice to the album to me. In fact, if you like Show No Mercy or Kill 'Em All, there should be no issue here. They've both got worse productions than this album. I don't find it an issue at all. The other complaint people tend to have is the lineup change. They lost Dave Lombardo. Dave Lombardo's a god. He's probably the best drummer on the planet, and he's perfect for Slayer. I don't disagree with that at all. Paul Bostaph, though, absolutely no slouch. He's incredible, and he brought a very unique sound to this album. That being that his drumming is a little bit more technical, slightly progressive, and the band seemed to adapt to that. This is their closest to tech thrash they ever got. Some of the songs here are quite complex and have interesting rhythms that Slayer were never really known for before. Unfortunately, never really flirted with that again henceforth either. That makes this album their most technical, their most complex, and in some ways it's one of their heaviest albums as well. Paul's drumming definitely added an interesting flavor there. Now, for me, I know I'm in the minority, especially as a thrash fan, but mood, atmosphere, and lyricism are super, super important to me in all forms of music. One of the reasons Slayer is my favorite thrash band is because they're so incredibly dark, much more so than the other big four. I mean, it's a mystery how they ever became somewhat mainstream with the kind of lyricism and thematicism they have going on here. But Slayer were always known for hellfire, Satanism, Dungeons and Dragons kind of evil. This album is where hell froze over. They chose to focus on something much more terrifying than demons, Satan, or monsters. Humanity. And humanity is a different kind of evil. It's not as flashy. It's not as burning. It is cold and calculated. And the musical sound of this album fits that thematicism perfectly. Killing Fields is an odd opener for a Slayer album. Slayer openers usually have some incredibly iconic riff and a chorus that is not quite anthemic, but you can scream along to. You know, War Assemble, South of Heaven, they get stuck in your head easily. Both the riffs, the choruses, everything. Killing Fields, not like that at all. One of the reasons being it is complex. The drum patterns, the guitar patterns, they are not standard for a Slayer song. They sound technical. They sound cold. They sound clinical. And then Tom Araya, his screaming is very off-kilter, perfectly rhythmic, but it's not catchy, right? It sounds a bit maniacal. And this song's about a cold, calculating sociopath. It fits perfectly. It gets you right in the psychology of this disturbed maniac. The music, the lyrics, the mood, they all come together perfectly. And so, while the song may not be as gripping as you want the first track of a Slayer album to be, with time, with depth, with substance, it's an incredible song. Remains one of my favorites. And that's something that is consistent throughout the album. The music serves the lyrics. It's just something really special that they hadn't done before. Of course, the music has always fit the dark Satanism that they've gone for. But here it fits something very different, and they do it very well in my opinion. Something else I'll talk about is the guitar solos. Slayer guitar solos have been unique in how chaotic and infamous they are at this point. but they've never been the most incredible things. I think Divine Intervention has their most mature guitar solos. That being that they serve the song. There's some melody, there's some mood to them. There's just as much dissonance, but it doesn't sound as chaotic. Again, it sounds clinical. It sounds calculated. The guitar solos serve the songs. This is new for Slayer. Didn't really do it after this either, but on this album, they sound very special. And I want to give a shout out to the title track, Divine Intervention, for being one of the most unique songs they ever wrote. This is a song, not satanic, not even anti-religious, but it's still about God. It's about meeting God, and they put you in the skin, in the mindset of someone at the mercy of God. This is something that should be peaceful, the most serene moment in human existence, according to religion, right? But they frame it as the most helpless, harrowing, vulnerable experience you could possibly imagine, blinded by God's light, at total mercy of God's power, something a mortal human cannot even comprehend, and therefore the most incredibly harrowing experience you could imagine. That's such a unique take, and the music serves it because it switches back and forth between doomy. This is a doomy Slayer song, and then it goes into crazy technical territory, and then the guitar solo is surprisingly melodic, yet still twisted. Tom's screaming is the most manic and powerful it has ever been on this song. It's an incredible song, and I never hear anyone talk about it. A lot of the songs on this album are similar. They're well thought out songs. I'm not saying that Slayer's other songs aren't. Slayer's other songs all have some of the best riffs in the history of music. But I feel like the songwriting on this album, that being not just the riffs, but the rhythms, the mood, the atmosphere, the lyrics, they all came together in such a perfect way. And I think that doesn't appeal as much to most thrash fans because they just want the riffs, you know? There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with just really focusing on the riffs. But this album is a slow burner. For someone who can appreciate the depth here, I think it offers more than any other Slayer album. I think the technical aspect plays into that as well. This is definitely the most technical thrash metal influenced album that Slayer ever did. This is kind of their And Justice for All in that way. Production issues as well. And Paul Bostaph adds to that. His drumming is super unique and very technical. The lyricism and the mood adds to that, and the fact that it's more cold and clinical. It's super unique for Slayer, and I love it for that. I also get why most people might not be looking for in a Slayer album, but for me it's just so special. At the risk of sounding a little crazy, I will say this album was immensely important to me in my high school years. Now, metal has always been one of the best methods of emotional catharsis for me. Throw on a metal album and it'll just exercise your negative emotions, at least for me. That's why I love it so much. Whenever I have these negative feelings, metal is there for me. Metal can relate to that, metal can embrace that, metal can exercise that. Now, in middle school, high school, I wasn't sad or depressed yet. That wasn't until I fell in love. Early high school, when I discovered this album, I was angry. I was misanthropic. And this album is misanthropy on another level. When you're not talking about Satan and magic anymore, you're talking about humanity, the evil that humanity does. There is nothing better for exercising anger and hatred than this. This was my go-to album. This remains one of my go-to albums. Just incredible for emotional catharsis, in my opinion, with how dark and twisted and evil and real it is. It's real. That's what separates it from a lot of thrash and a lot of Slayer's older catalog. Again, I know I'm in the minority, especially for thrash fans, as someone who really cares and appreciates mood, atmosphere, and lyricism, but I do. And this album mixes that with Slayer's incredible riff writing, songwriting style to just make the perfect album for me. It's the perfect album for me. What can I say? I love it. I give it a perfect 100. I have never stopped listening to it in 15 years. I've never heard anything that fills me with the same feeling that this does of ecstasy. my favorite